Hello, and I thought we'd have a look at the Zavod 311 rush changes. So these have been applied to the CTE servers. So we're going to go through them base by base, have a look at what the changes are, and then at the end have a bit of a discussion about whether or not these changes are actually a good idea, a bad idea, or don't make much difference. So let's start at the beginning with base 1, and this is the original layout. So we have B, which is in the inspection pit. This you can get to through the tunnel or down the steps to the inspection pit from the building. Outside we have A, which is hidden amongst these tanks, and although there's plenty of cover, it's overlooked by the hill above, and while you can defend from these containers, you can't go behind them because it's out of bounds. So let's have a look at what's changed in the CTE layout. So the first thing you'll notice is that A is now inside and it's on this first level. It's not underneath anymore, and you've got some more containers around it. B has been moved outside into this entranceway. So B now has very little cover as the attackers can get on those hills opposite and vehicles can drive pretty much straight up to it. Talking of vehicles, the attackers now get an extra tank on this first set of MCOMs. So this MCOM is much harder to defend, but the one inside is probably actually easier to defend because you can see it from more places. Now let's take a look at the original layout of base 2. So the B MCOM is in this destroyed building, and it's a bit tricky to get to it because jumping up these things doesn't always work, but there it is, stuck up in the top of this destroyed building. A is on the ground floor of the opposite building, and this is probably the one that's easiest to defend. In the new CTE version, the MCOMs haven't actually moved, so A is still in the ground floor down here, and B is still in this destroyed building, although for some reason the building was invisible for me in this round. There have been some major changes to the vehicles. The defenders have lost a tank, and the attackers have gained an Amtrak and a transport chopper. And that transport chopper will come back to haunt you. Onto the original layout of base 3. So originally A is inside here where the tower explosives are for the conquest map, and B is again underground in an inspection pit. So you can get to this through the tunnels, or you can just run around the building like I am, or you can get down into it through these inspection trenches. So there it is, hiding at the back. In the new CTE layout, the MCOMs haven't actually moved, but again the vehicle balance has been shifted quite massively. So the attackers have a transport chopper, and as we all know, these buildings are notorious for the roofs being camped. The defenders only have the ladders to get up there. The defenders also suffer from the disadvantage that they still don't have a tank. So the attackers are getting armoured vehicles and the defenders aren't. So this is the original version of the final base, base 4. And A is sitting out in the open in this little covered area, so the access to this point is pretty open, and the defenders have quite an easy time of keeping people pinned. The simple tactic is to blow away the roof of this region from the tower, and then you can shoot down into it. So the B MCOM is up here in the tower, and this one is probably the hardest one to assault, because you have to come up the ladders, and the tower has a pretty good view of the surrounding area. You can get sniped off the tower, but a couple of spawn beacons up here and it's pretty easy to defend. In the CTE version of base 4, they've moved the A MCOM, so it's no longer outside, it's actually in this first building, which means the attackers have a lot more cover getting to it. The defenders can shoot out from this building, but there are tanks involved and rockets, so this building doesn't usually stand for very long. B is still in the same place up in this tower, and because the attackers have got a transport chopper, this tower is quite a bit more vulnerable to people parachuting onto it, and the chopper can minigun through the windows. So those are the changes that have been made, and I've taken a copy of this map and marked on it where the new MCOMs are and where the old ones are. So the new MCOMs are in yellow, the old MCOMs are in green, and as you can see, only 3 of the MCOMs have actually changed positions. Both of the ones on the first base have changed. The outside point has been moved round closer to the road, and the inside point has been taken out of the inspection pit up onto the main level. On the 4th base we have one that's changed, and that's the ground level point has been moved from outside to inside the first building. Now there have been some other changes as well. There's a couple of stationary machine guns which I think have turned into rocket launchers now. Can't confirm this as I don't really remember what they were like before. By far the biggest change is the vehicle balance. The attackers get more vehicles at every point. So at base 1 they're rolling tanks, at base 2 they've got a tank, an Amtrak and some quad bikes and a helicopter. At base 3 they've got the helicopter and a tank. Base 4 I think they have 2 tanks. So against this the defenders have no armour until base 4. So really the defenders are relying on engineers. That's all they've got to take these tanks on with. Now the extra ground armour wouldn't be too bad if the attackers also didn't have a helicopter. That gives them the high ground on buildings, and it means that the engineers have to deal with air target and ground targets, and that's just putting too much load on a few engineers on the defence. The attackers having a transport helicopter at base 2, base 3 and base 4 is too big an advantage. The defenders are having to deal with troops on the ground, armour on the ground, miniguns in the air, troops on rooftops, and it's just too much for the defenders to deal with. There's been a lot of back and forth on the forums about what changes need to be made to Zavod Rush on CTE to make it balanced in the way that DICE wanted. And I was going to go into quite a long discussion about exactly what these changes should be and what the result would be, but DICE have already posted that they are going to be making changes to the way that the map is balanced. So let's have a look at the post from DICE. First thing we can see here is that a couple of the bugs that people have reported, DICE are going to sort. So on base 2, as a defender you can spawn out of bounds. Now it's not that far out of bounds that you can't run back inbound, but it shouldn't be happening. And as you've seen in this video, the building that MCOM B should be in at base 2 sometimes is invisible, which means you can't really defend or attack that objective. Next comes a couple of armour changes. They're going to remove the tank from base 1 to make it almost a pure infantry fight, and they're going to remove the Amtrak from base 2. So they'll still get a tank and they'll still get a couple of quad bikes, but they're going to lose the Amtrak. It will be replaced by something else. I imagine it's probably going to be a Jeep. And the biggest change is that the helicopter isn't going to be spawning at base 2 anymore, it's going to be spawning at base 3. And they're going to try and restrict how far up the map it can fly. Now what I'm hoping they mean by this is that it's going to spawn on base 3 when they've captured it, not spawning when they start attacking base 3. Base 3 really doesn't need the helicopter. Where the attackers need the helicopter is base 4 when they've got to deal with the tower, and allowing them to drop onto the tower is probably fair. And they give some notes on what their overall balance objective is, and essentially it is that base 1 should be in favour of the attackers, base 2 and 3 should be 50-50, and base 4 should have the advantage to the defenders. So what you're going to get is less rounds that just stall at the first bases. The attackers should be able to push through the first base. It will be an even fight over base 2 and 3, and they're going to have to work really hard to capture base 4. So it's going to be an increasing difficulty progression. These changes that DICE are going to make show why CTE is such a good idea. Rush mode's already been tested by DICE in-house on Zavod and on Shanghai, but they haven't found the same problems that the actual players have found. The reason for that is that there are a lot of players out there that will exploit anything they can find. There's an example in the gameplay that I put on this video, and that is that if you're an attacker and you sprint at that outside MCOM, you can get there before the defenders, and you'll see on that video that I just run straight for that objective and arm it before the defenders get there. If you have several hundred people testing something, they're going to try pretty much anything they can do to get an advantage on that map, and the players at DICE are probably playing it the way they envisaged it when they made it, not playing it to destruction. In terms of Zavod's balancing, I think that originally it was too stacked in favour of the defenders. The changes they made on CTE are too stacked in favour of the attackers, but I think what DICE are proposing to change in the next iteration will make it pretty much 50-50 balanced. I'm still not sure about where that helicopter is going to spawn and at what point, but the loss of the tank and the loss of the Amtrak are going to make it a lot more of a fair fight. I'm pretty happy with the way that DICE is dealing with these changes to Rush. After a couple of days of testing, the player base has found the bugs, seen the imbalances, and DICE are going straight in and sorting it out. So I know it's 6 months down the line, but hopefully soon we should have a balanced Rush. Now it's not going to be every map, it's only going to be the base game maps, but that's still quite a large map pool to play Rush on and have a more enjoyable time. So I look forward to seeing what they do with the other maps, and I'll let you know what those are like when they put them on the CTE server. And there should be a video coming up shortly which is going to have a look at the changes made to Siege of Shanghai. Thanks for watching.